1973 box office champs. You know, it's interesting when you start thinking about like movies that are well known from a year and then the movies that made the money that year. And it's starting to get less and less, like they get separated. Like it's now blockbusters that make that big budget money. And it's not necessarily the best made films of that year.
Yeah, I mean, if we're still doing this show in 25 years, are we going to be talking about every Marvel movie that comes out? I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Probably, because they still make a lot of money, but I think people are starting to get tired of them.
I don't know if 25 years from now. Like, I'd say we have to talk about Iron Man, because Iron Man started the whole Marvel thing and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
We might have to talk about Avengers Endgame, because it's the biggest grossing film of all time, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
You know, are we going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania? I don't know that we are. I mean, you know, it's one of the, like, it's just, yeah.
Phase 4, 5, and 6 seem to be petering out. They're not doing as well and aren't as well planned, possibly, as the first three phases were. So, but in 1973, I think it actually went along a little bit more with what people might expect. So, number 3 top grossing film.
Before you even get there, Matt, we talked about all 3 of those movies, and I'm so proud of us.
I know, but accident too. I don't. We didn't even, before even looking at this list,
we didn't even look at it. But here we are. We got all 3 of them.
So, number 3 was American Graffiti,
which I think would not be in the top 3. I can't imagine a coming-of-age movie about kids living a decade ago. Like, if we made a movie about kids in the 2010s, you know, who are like the last fling of summer, and it's a bittersweet drama about their hopes and dreams, that would not be the number 3 movie of the year. So,
not unless they all had superpowers and were fighting crime.
Exactly, and went into a parallel universe to save the world from some, space alien god monster. Yeah, no.
But even then, Power Rangers, the new movie, did not do that great. Well, so I don't know. Maybe that'll suck anyways.
There you are.
Number 2 was The Sting,
which I still haven't seen because we're talking about it next week.
Yes, I'm excited to see it. I've never seen it either.
I'm excited to see it too. I mean, if nothing else, Paul Newman, Robert Redford, I'll have a fan ready to cool myself off watching the 2 of them. But never seen it. But again, a period piece about a couple of groups, I don't know, like 40 years in the past. So that would make a movie made today would be like a period piece about 2 grifters in the 80s. That would not be the number 2 movie of the year in 2023. It just would not.
I mean, I guess unless it depends on the people that starred in it, I think. Like, I'm kind of thinking Oppenheimer might actually be one of the best grossing films this summer.
It could be. And Barbie could be neck and neck.
Yes. Which, who would have thought that?
Exactly. Let me just say, I love the whole Barbenheimer thing. That delights me to no end. Like, every time I see Barbenheimer, I'm just like, and friend of the pod, Justin, who's been on a couple times, he last talked with us about Elizabeth. He was like, what is that? I don't get that. I'm like, I think it's delightful. Leave them alone. I think it's hilarious. Barbenheimer just makes my day.
And then the highest grossing film of 1973 was The Exorcist.
Which, a really fucking scary movie that everyone's talking about, could totally be the top grossing movie.
Yes.
I mean, some things never change, right?
Yep.
So, and I watched a lot, and of course I did my research getting ready for this movie, and it was a phenomenon. I mean, there were lines around the block, and they didn't expect it to be this huge, but everyone kept saying, oh, I was there and a woman fainted, it was so scary, and it was like, oh, I gotta see this. And then of course the Catholic Church got involved and was like, this is terrible, no one should ever see it. So of course everyone was like, well, now we have to see it. And it was a monster. Pardon the pun, hit.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Rewind Project. I am Eric.
I'm Matt.
And with us today, friend of the pod, returning after quite a long while, filling in for Allie Jenkins this week, is the lovable Matt Baughman. How are you today, Matt?
Hey, good. Happy to be here, and I hope I can at least try to fit into Allie's shoes.
Well,
I'll try.
Allie has big shoes to fill, but when she told us she couldn't make this one, it was just kind of, we just sat around for, like, it took us 15 seconds to say who among our friends of the pod would probably be most interested in talking about The Exorcist of all things. And Allie just went, well, you could call Baughman, and we were like, done. There we go.
We'll take it. Yeah. I wish Allie was here because I'd like to hear her review of The Exorcist.
I'm very curious to hear what Allie has to say about The Exorcist, and I hope she watches it on the plane ride home. She's on a business trip this week, folks, so she's out there making the money because we don't make it on this show. I know you're shocked that we don't make a cent off the Rewind Project. We do it for love, but she's out there making the coin. But I hope she watches it on the way home and sends us her commentary on the thread, because because
she doesn't handle scary movies very well, or grossness very well, and I think this is a double handle for that one.
Yeah, but no rats though. Were there? There weren't any rats.
It was set in Georgetown, so there got to be rats somewhere, but I don't...
They were off screen. The rats did not make a cameo. Okay, so we're here to talk about The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, who we're just going through his whole filmography, I guess, because we talked about The Boys in the Band in 1970, which was his directorial debut. Then we talked about The French Connection, which is the movie he won the Oscar for. And now this one... I'm not seeing a real through line with those three movies. I mean, I will say that William Friedkin's got quite a bit of range from what I've seen thus far. And I will say all three are movies that I really liked. So good for him.
I mean, well, I don't know that I liked Boys in the Band, but I think it was a fairly well-made movie, so I'll give him credit there.
Yeah. I mean, you had more issues with the writing, I think, than the directing with that one. But and I will just be, I loved it because, 8 bitchy catty queens in a room. I'm so there. Done. This was a screenplay written by William Peter Blatty based on his novel of the same name. So the novel came out. It was all about, this young girl getting possessed by the devil, and it became this, thing that movie studios immediately were like, who's making this movie? Warner Brothers snapped up the rights, and here we are. Some notable achievements for this film. It won 2 Oscars, one for Blatty for Best Adapted Screenplay. Although if he'd had his way, it would have been a very different movie. Apparently, William Friedkin told him he didn't like his original draft of The Exorcist and to go back to the drawing board and make it better. So they did. And there's a whole one big thing that William Friedkin is absolutely responsible for. We will talk about later on in the show. It also won for Best Sound. And interesting, I was just talking with some folks this weekend who, out of nowhere, I wasn't talking about the pod, I didn't bring up this movie, but somebody was talking about, they went to go see a play, and they said the sound engineers for this play were so bad. Apparently a phone rang, and everyone just, and he said, you remember in The Exorcist when the phone rang and everybody just jumped out of their seats because it was so loud? It was like that. And I'm like, okay, listen, if somebody's still talking about the sound of The Exorcist 50 years later, I guess it deserved that Oscar. So Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound.
So did it not get nominated for Best Makeup, which is surprising to me.
I guess not. And if that was a category in 74, I didn't even look.
Because all these years, I didn't realize Father Marin was only like my age right now, in his 40s.
Yes.
I always thought he was in his 70s. And I was like, I had to look him up because the makeup for him and the acting, he did very well in the movie. I mean, for Reagan, obviously it's, Exorcist makeup, but his makeup was so subtle, it looked like he was in his 70s and 80s.
I didn't realize that he wasn't until you just
said
it.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, no, Max von Sydow made a movie, he was working well into, the 80s, and I think he died in the 80s or 90s, but yeah,
No, he died in 2020.
Oh, he died very... Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait, he must have been in like mid 100s.
Yeah.
And that's why I looked up his age, and he was only like 43 or something when he shot this movie.
Yeah. No, he was. They had to age him up because they wanted him to be older, but they really wanted him. Will Friedkin really wanted him for that role, and so we'll just age him up. It's fine. But it's interesting that when you think about makeup in The Exorcist, of course you think about Regan with all of her gangrenous sores and all that kind of gross stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was also some very subtle makeup. But the makeup for her was actually pretty subtle as well.
True.
At the beginning.
That, yeah.
I mean, they really did. She didn't just show up one day and look like that. I mean, they kind of very gradually turned her into that possessed monster. It did get other nominations, though. It was nominated for Best Picture, which might have been the first horror movie ever to be nominated for Best Picture. I can't say that definitively, but there haven't been many.
Honestly, well-deserved, because this is a really well-written and directed film.
It is it's a solid movie. I was really surprised at how much I was like, this is a good movie. I didn't expect that. Also nominated for Best Director, nominated for Best Actress for Ellen Burstyn, Best Supporting Actor, for Jason Miller, Best Supporting Actress for Linda Blair, and also Cinematography, Art Direction, and Editing. All noms for that. I love going to the AFI lists now to see if any of these things have ever scored. And this movie is number 3 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills list for the scary movies, behind Psycho and Jaws. So 2 worthy contenders for movies that scare the pants off of you. And then they have a list called 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains. And they list 50 heroes and 50 villains. And Regan, not the demon who possessed her, but Regan herself is listed as the number 9 villain in film history. And because they list her, I looked at the whole list, and she is the only child on the list. Everyone else is an adult villain. I think Darth Vader might have been number 1. But there we go.
So interesting, she beats out Damien, who is actually, the son of Satan.
Yes, in The Omen. I mean, they only had room for 50 villains. And again, these were all, they weren't just horror movies. I mean, they were just anybody who was a bad guy in a movie ever. But yeah, I scanned the list. I wasn't looking for Damien, but I didn't see him. So yeah, she's the only kid who shows up as one of the top 50 villains of film history. When adjusted for inflation, The Exorcist is still the most successful Warner Brothers film ever made. So it is the number 1 for that studio, and was the highest grossing horror film of all time until it was released in 2017.
Interesting.
Yeah, which good horror movie too. I'm not a big horror movie fan, but those 2 films are really good.
Yeah, I saw it in the theaters, and yes, I enjoyed that very much. And we're going to talk as well about kind of horror as a genre and our feelings about it, but also kind of the feelings of the larger society about horror movies, because I think they get a bad rap. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So the plot of this movie is pretty simple. A demon possesses a 12-year-old girl and 2 priests, one of whom is an expert in this kind of thing, and one of whom is a priest that might be actually losing their faith in God altogether. Team up to expunge the demon from this little girl's body. And there you are.
It's a buddy priest film. Is really
that's really at its core. It's 2 mismatched wacky priests on a journey. Yeah. So let's talk about this cast. We'll start with the person who got top billing. I don't know if she deserves top billing, but she was clearly the biggest star they had, who had a substantial role throughout. Ellen Burstyn as the mom, Chris McNeil in this movie.
I liked her. I really liked the journey that she takes as kind of and I'm guessing that she was an atheist. Like, she didn't seem to have any religious leaning whatsoever. And then having to go from science to religion to actually find her solution. I thought she was really good. She was a little pushy throughout the movie and treated people a little poorly.
I thought so too. I was like, this woman's a pain in the ass. Is what my general. I mean, that's the way they set her up, as kind of a high-strung pain in the ass. Yeah. Which, she is certainly humbled by this whole experience, and so maybe that's part of the arc as well. But yeah, I had the same feeling.
Yeah, I've never. So I have a weird relationship with this movie. I saw this movie for the first time in college during a midnight showing, and I fell asleep through most of it before any of the action started. Like, I don't remember any of it. But Ellen Burstyn, I've only known her as like an older actress. So it's kind of interesting to see her young and kind of like in her prime, during this time with her. I remember her from like, that movie with Marlon Wayans and about drugs and Jennifer Connelly. What's that movie called?
Oh, Requiem for a Dream.
Requiem for a Dream. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like, I think as I recall, the first time I ever saw her in a movie.
And she was amazing.
Oh yeah.
In that movie. I mean, everyone's like, Ellen Burstyn is not only back, she has never gone anywhere. I mean, she is fantastic in that film. It's hard to watch.
Very hard.
But she's great. Yeah. I'm really curious to see a movie that she did that I've never seen. She made it right after this one, and it's called Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Have you heard of this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is actually Martin Scorsese's follow-up to Mean Streets in a weird kind of way, but it's about this woman who leaves her husband with her young child and gets out and ends up working in this small town diner. Did you ever watch the sitcom Alice starring Linda Blair? This is the movie that spurred on Alice. This was Alice was based on Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Ellen Burstyn played Alice, and Diane Ladd, I believe, Laura Dern's mom, played Flo. Remember Flo? Kiss my grits. Mm-hmm. That was her. And then I don't remember who played Mel, who owned the diner, and there was also Vera. You know, I mean, the whole cast was there. And after the movie, somebody said this would actually make a really funny sitcom, so they just did it. But yeah, at the time, it was like, ooh, a sitcom about a single mom who left her husband. That's shocking. You know, it's not really shocking today. But yeah, and it was all based on a Scorsese film, which just makes me go, I need to see this movie. And she was nominated for an Oscar for that one and might have won. I didn't look that up, but I mean, I think she might have. She didn't win for this one, but I think she might have picked it up for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. So, and came out in 1974. So hold the line. We might be watching that one next year if anyone picks it. But yeah, I thought she was great in this.
Yeah, I think so too.
Despite being kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, I didn't love the character so much. I don't know that I'd want to be friends with Chris McNeil. But I have to say, Ellen Burstyn lent some gravitas to what could have just been the shrieking, scared mother role.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I was a possessed child, though, I would want that character on my side trying to figure it out.
Absolutely.
So, like, her as a good mom.
Yeah, she was a badass mom. She was going to find what was going on. Now, the next person on the cast list, I have veered from the way that the top billing that was given to folks, and because I thought it was full of shit. Because this guy is absolutely the lead of the movie, as far as I'm concerned, along with Ellen Burstyn, is Jason Miller, who is a not very well-known actor, but someone who actually took the place of the actor who had already been cast. They had cast Stacy Keach to play this role.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. And Jason Miller said, no, I will screen test for this role. And William Friedkin's like, if you can pay to get yourself back to whether they were in LA or New York. Anyway, he had to fly across country for a screen test that he said the role was already cast. But he's like, please let me test out for this role. And apparently William Friedkin saw the rushes from his screen test, and they fired Stacy Keach and paid him his entire salary.
That's nuts. I didn't know that. Wow.
And then cast this guy instead. Was he worth it? Let's talk about it.
I mean, I thought he was good. I don't know if he would be. I mean, I like Stacy Keach a lot. I don't know if it was like, I can't see how his audition would have been so mind blowing that they had to fire an actor who didn't do anything wrong.
I can agree with you on that, but I will say I don't know that I see Stacy Keach in this role.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know that Stacy Keach could play melancholy enough to make, you know what I mean? There's something about this particular priest that I just kind of like, he feels down on his luck, and like you just kind of believe that he's losing his faith, even though he's still trying to be a good guy. And that's the idea of having to perform an exorcist, because he's an exorcism. He doesn't necessarily believe in possession either. I mean, it takes him a while to actually believe that this is a possession. I mean, he only goes there to the house on a whim, and because she seems to be so convinced of it. I don't know that I could believe Stacy Keach in this role. So I mean, as much as we don't really, hear from Jason Miller very much, I mean, I know who Stacy Keach is. Jason Miller, I don't really know who he is outside of this.
I've never seen him before or after this movie. I know he's done stuff. I know he was in Rudy, which is one of my favorite movies, but he had a small part in that. But he, I mean, I never read the book, so I don't know if this was just like a spitting image from the book. Maybe that's why he was cast. Stacy Keach, I only have I've only seen him as an older kind of gruff guy.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was like as a younger actor.
I think Stacy Keach would have been Stacy Keach is a dependably really good actor. Like, I think he would have done what needed to be done, and I think he would have been fine. But what Friedkin said about Jason Miller was that he just exuded Catholic guilt from every pore. And I totally agree with that. I mean, it's just because even if you're losing your faith, and we talked about this, Matt, when we talked about Mean Streets last week, is that if you were raised Catholic or are a Catholic, there's just something intrinsic you understand about guilt as the primary motivating factor of your life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, like just Jason Miller just looking at the screen with these puppy dog eyes, just feeling so bad for himself.
That is true. He had the
absolutely translated to everything that Friedkin wanted him to be. And I thought he was quite good. I mean, it just, I have no quibbles with his Oscar nomination. I don't know who else was nominated, but if anything, I would have said he probably deserved to be in the leading category and not supporting, but he was also like number 5 or 6 on the credits, so that probably had something to do with that as well. Positioning him as a lead might have been weird. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I thought he was great. The character was interesting because, like, it's just, for whatever reason, he just happens to have this position as the resident psychologist of Georgetown University. And so he's the one that Ellen Burstyn goes to see. And you're right, Matt. I think he's more interested in helping her through her psychological distress than he is to say, oh, let me find this demon to exorcise, because he's like, yeah, whatever. But I think he's convinced that Chris McNeil is not insane.
Yes.
And, she's genuinely worried for her child, and it's like, let me go see kind of what's going on. But and everybody in this movie, I mean, everyone she runs into, all other options around, any kind of mental disease or emotional distress have all been exhausted before people finally go, well, maybe she's actually possessed by a demon. Yeah. Which I kind of appreciated, because I can't see, Hollywood would make a movie about, oh, it's the devil, and we just go there right away. But I don't think that would happen in real life.
Yeah, I mean, the scariest scenes for me were the testing that they did for with Reagan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
With the stuff in her neck.
Yes.
It was just like,
interesting fact about that. You hear about people fainting during The Exorcist all the time. Most of the people who fainted when she got the needle in the neck.
Oh, I believe it. Oof.
That was the moment that made people go, ugh, and then everyone's like, oh, it's a movie about demon possession and it's so scary, people faint. But they fainted because this is a doctor's office where that shit could happen. And I watched it through my fingers. I'm not going to lie. The needle went into her neck and I was like, ah. Yeah. Bad.
I'm just glad we've come a long way since then, because that giant, well, not giant, but like the needle into the neck, then all the other procedures that happen with all the blood squirting out and everything just does not happen now with the way that we handle that stuff.
Anyway, let's talk about the ubiquitous Linda Blair, who is still synonymous with this movie. I wonder if this movie, I mean, she got an Oscar nomination and obviously it made her world famous. She's a good actor, but her career never really did anything after this. She was just the possessed girl from The Exorcist. I think it might have drug her down a little bit, which is too bad.
I think so, too. I think she's just so connected to this movie and this character that really did kind of tank her career a little bit, And it's sad as a child actress as well.
I wonder, too, if playing a part like this, it's either got to be a lot of fun, or it's got to mess you up mentally. I don't know which it would have happened for her. I mean, because this is a fairly scary movie, I would think, and like all the stuff that I would imagine they have to say on set that she's supposed to be saying in the other voice and stuff for the other actors to respond to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's got to be some stuff there that really kind of messes with you a little bit. But she was great. I mean, as just a child, and then as she slowly becomes possessed and how she acts throughout, she was fantastic. And you really were there with her when the procedures were happening and stuff inside the hospital. So it is sad that her career did not take off.
Yeah, some of her best acting, I think, in this whole thing is when the needle goes in the neck and you can see that she's trying not to move, but she's also choking a little bit. Yeah. And it was very subtle, and I was like, that is a good, because, that was like a mechanical pencil, right? I mean, there wasn't anything going in this child's neck, I hope. But
it was the 70s, who knows?
Who knows? I mean, maybe they said, well, we're just going to do it because we want it to look real. You signed up for it, Linda. Get on the chair. I mean, but I hope not. But I mean, that was some really good. If that was acting, that was some good acting. She's really, really, really good. Yeah, and funny. I watched a little documentary about the making of The Exorcist because it just showed up right after this one on my Apple TV, and I was like, well, I'm doing a podcast about The Exorcist. Let me watch this thing. They did mix in another voice to play the voice of the demon who kind of talks through her. But everything that Reagan mouthed, Linda Blair actually said on set. So this little girl looked at a priest or a man in a priest costume and said, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." She said that line. This little girl.
Yeah.
And I have to say, though, it is a lot less scary when sweet little Linda Blair, covered in makeup, is saying some of these lines. Because you can hear it said by Linda Blair. And it's kind of funny. I mean, it's just, and I was like, that would not have been nearly as scary. So good call in kind of redubbing that voice after a while. But even that was done pretty subtly. I'm not sure I clocked exactly when we stopped hearing Linda Blair's voice and started hearing the voice of Pazuzu, which is the name of that demon, by the way, although you never hear it in the movie.
Never.
But it was based on a real Abyssinian demon who ruined crops. And that statue that you see at the very beginning, that's Pazuzu. And that's who Blatty used as kind of he did a little bit of research about that demon and decided that was going to be the one to possess this little girl.
Now, is it ever explained that how Pazuzu got into Reagan? Like how it got into the house?
Well, not really, but a lot of people have kind of worked out this very subtle thing that during the archaeological dig at the beginning, that Pazuzu is kind of released into the world when they find that artifact that is not buried. Like somehow that kind of brings him back. And I don't know why he traveled all the way around the world and ended up in Georgetown, of all places, but he entered Regan because of two things. One, she was playing with a Ouija board downstairs.
Yes.
And that, and of course, I played with a Ouija board in my life. I was never possessed by a demon from Iraq, but whatever. So that was one. But also that she was particularly vulnerable because her father had just abandoned the family and she was kind of looking for a father figure. So he presented to her as this Captain Howdy, right? Remember, Captain Howdy? That's not very nice. And Captain Howdy was named because her father, and you only saw this for a second. If you saw the tabloid that she was reading that detailed her parents' divorce that her mom finds at the very beginning of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
On the cover, you see that her dad's name was Howard. And that's supposed to be this link. Like, he called himself Captain Howdy because she really missed her dad. Which is really, I mean, you talk about, you just leave a little trail of breadcrumbs, but they do not spell it all out for you. But that's basically why this little girl right now, because she was particularly vulnerable, in need of a father figure, would have been open to a lot of the conversations that this girl would need to have. She wasn't possessed like right away. Like, he had to kind of worm his way into her. But that's how that happened. Again, why, like, there's lots of kids in the world who, whose dad just left home that might be playing with a Ouija board in their parents' basement. Why this particular girl, no one knows. But there we are.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't, as I was thinking about it, I was like, I couldn't figure out how this happened, like how this demon got into this house. I didn't, but I do remember the Ouija board part, and I assume that was connected. But I guess the whole first 10 minutes of Father Marin in Iraq, it didn't really connect to me for some reason.
Yeah.
That whole sequence.
Well, we're going to talk about that whole sequence before long.
Okay.
But yeah, and I think that it might have been, just as I'm saying this, when they said that Father Marin is at Woodstock, and I thought, Woodstock, New York? That's a weird place for a priest to be. But actually, no, there's a Woodstock seminary right outside of D.C. So maybe Pazuzu followed Father Marin home and really wants to get to this priest, because before he even shows up, the demon is saying Marin on the thing. Like, he wants to face off with this super exorcist priest. And so maybe he is looking for someone in the DMV that he could easily possess to kind of get to him. But then he also starts targeting this priest who is losing his faith by, knows all about the mom, knows all about the, because he's a demon. Demons have connections. They've got a network. Yeah. So I think it all, but it never spells it all out for you, which I kind of like, actually. I mean, it had, at the end, if there had been some bizarre explanation, I would have been like, whatever. Like, it's almost better that it's scarier if it could happen to your kid.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I didn't even pick up on those subtle things, and I don't feel like I enjoyed the movie any less because I didn't. So
yeah, I mean, it didn't. Yeah. It was good enough that you weren't asking. I mean, I was asking at the beginning, like, why this girl? But then it got super fucking scary, and I stopped thinking about it, and I didn't care anymore. So there we are.
And did they get any money from Milton Bradley because that Ouija board? Is that? I mean,
they should have. They should have.
Some, yeah.
Leads to demon possession.
Exactly. But, the game people wised up. They're like, when we make a movie about Clue, we're going to brand it. Damn it. Yeah, very different film. Next on our list is Max von Sydow as Father Merrin, who I principally know from playing Ming the Merciless in the 1981 classic Flash Gordon, and by classic I mean camp classic that you make fun of after too much drinking.
I don't know that I know much about Max von Sydow, but amazing name for the screen. You hire him just for the name.
So he was a big deal. He's a Swedish actor, and he did many films by Ingmar Bergman.
Okay.
Okay.
He was a big deal in the 70s from being associated with Bergman and all of his very highbrow kind of movies. Max von Sydow is also in one of my favorite movies by my favorite disgraced, canceled filmmaker. He's in Hannah and Her Sisters from Woody Allen. And he's actually perfect for that movie because he's such a snob. And he kind of, that just kind of very erudite way that Max von Sydow has of walking through this whole movie. It's very much the same. But yeah, he's Barbara Hershey's lover in that one, who she abandons for a younger man. And you could kind of, it was important for that movie that you knew why she was stepping out on her lover. And because it was Max von Sydow, who was just constantly bitching about everything, he's like, yeah, I can see that. Good job, Barbara. Yeah.
Now, at this time, was he a famous actor?
He was well known in kind of the art movie kind of circles. Yes. I mean, people who knew movies definitely knew his name.
Okay. Because I'm just kind of curious why they cast, I mean, maybe it's physical, why they cast a younger person to play someone so old at that. I instead of getting an actual 70-something-year-old.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that Friedkin was definitely a fan. William Friedkin loved all those Ingmar Bergman movies, and I think really wanted to work with Max von Sydow. I think he's right for this role. He just shows up with all of the gravitas you need. I mean, he just seems like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And, so I mean, I think he's perfect in that way. You're right. I mean, they had to go through this whole process of aging him. But yes, he got second billing for this movie. So for a pretty small role.
Yeah, not in it as much as I thought he was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's at the very beginning, and then he disappears for well over half the movie. And then he comes back at the very end. But he certainly makes his presence known. And I wasn't really quibbling with it, but the reason that he got second billing is because he was such a big name.
Yeah, okay.
Among movie folks. I mean, he was kind of trying to think of somebody kind of like that. But it would be, an actor that isn't necessarily a household name, but if you watch lots of prestige foreign dramas, you know this guy, kind of a thing. Next up is a favorite of the pod. We've watched him in 12 Angry Men. We're going to watch him again when we go back to 1947 or 48, rather, later on this year. Lee J. Cobb played Lieutenant Kinderman, the police officer who's investigating this whole Michigas.
I didn't realize he was the guy from 12 Angry Men. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Great character actor.
Great actor. Yeah, great actor. Yeah, absolutely. And kind of disappears into whatever he's doing. But yeah, he was the horrible racist asshole in 12 Angry Men. And in this one, I mean, he's a cop, right? So he's following the facts. He's kind of the voice of reason throughout, who's just listen, somebody died because a character that was minor enough that I didn't put him on my cast list, but the director of the film that Ellen Burstyn is starring in, and the reason why she's in Georgetown, I mean, yes, we don't usually find a lot of famous actresses hanging around Georgetown University, but she's making a movie. And the director of her film one night went up to Reagan's bedroom because he was left in charge. The babysitter had to go out and get some medication for the girl, so said, watch the kid. And he was the first one to end up at the bottom of that famous staircase, basically thrown out the window and pitched down this, huge flight of concrete stairs and is dead. And Kinderman is treating this like a murder investigation, and I think he's pretty sure that little kid could not have thrown this grown man out of a window down a flight of stairs because he doesn't know about Pazuzu, but he wants to know like what's going on. So we first kind of, I think his first big scene is with Father Karras, meeting him at Georgetown and trying to ingratiate himself. And then he's got another really great scene with Ellen Burstyn later on. He comes to the house to ask some questions and kind of get on her good side as well. Yeah, he was great.
No problems with him. He was an interesting cop trying to, when he was interacting with both Father Karras and Chris, I mean, ingratiating and then pushing at the same time. It was kind of an interesting play back and forth, like trying to be a friend, but at the same time trying to figure out how to work that friendship for some more information and ingratiate, like even inviting Father Karras out for movies and stuff like that, like trying to find a way to get an in. Right. He was good at that. I liked him as a character.
And then that whole thing about, will you sign an autograph for my daughter? And I lied, it's for me. I'm like, you are doing all of that on purpose, dude. Yes. Like, that was not even like, you're acting all embarrassed, but you are totally getting on her. And she's a very vulnerable person at that moment. And you are just pushing all of those buttons. I mean, but to a good end, right? I mean, he wants to solve this murder. He's not a bad guy. But just very smart and very good at his job. The last person I put in this is just, he's the character that we actually are with at the very end of the movie. Not a big role, but I thought it was so interesting. William Friedkin cast an actual Jesuit priest to play Father Dyer. Okay. This man is not really an actor. And he was quite good, I thought, in the little role that he had. But he's the one who's playing the piano at the party originally when, Regan comes down and relieves herself all over the carpet, revenge peas like a Maltese during this whole party. And he's the one that first kind of tells her who Father Karras is because she's seen him around Georgetown and gives her the idea to maybe go visit him. But they're friends, and he's also got this great scene with Father Karras at Georgetown when, right after Karras's mother dies, and he kind of sneaks some booze in from the dean's office and just kind of, is a good friend to him. But yeah, I'm real solid, screen presence and not an actor. Like went right back to teaching at Gonzaga Prep in DC. And as he got older, he would tell all of his students, yeah, I was in The Exorcist. And they're like, you were not. And he's like, I'm right there.
That's so interesting. He looks like a movie star.
He does. He cuts a very nice figure on film. Very square jawline. I mean, I was like, he totally looks like an actor. And he was a creative consultant on this film. And then I think Friedkin just looked at him and said, you'd be really good to just get in there. It's not too far away from who you are. So there you go. And I guess he played the piano too. So bonus.
So is that how he got the part? Was he started out as a creative consultant?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
And Friedkin worked with a lot of priests and a lot of people. Like he got into like how does an exorcism work? What would really happen? From people who believe in exorcisms, I guess, but really kind of got into, and the fact that they're rarely done anymore was true. And so he got all of that stuff. I mean, between him and William Peter Blatty, they did quite a bit of research, but Friedkin really wanted this to seem very authentic, even to people who knew a lot about Catholicism and the way that they would handle a child possessed by a demon should one ever cross their path.
I wonder if Father O'Malley got any flack from the church then when they decided
for being
to
part of it. Yeah.
Here's the thing. The church did a huge turnaround after it became really, really popular and actually said, well, because this is such a pro-Catholic, anti-demon film, no shit. Pope John Paul II. Yes, this is not on the side of Satan. then they all said, well, I guess you can watch it, and I guess it's okay. So no, I don't think he got any long-term repercussions for doing this. But you know what? Jesuits wouldn't give a shit anyway. I mean, Jesuits are really the badass rock stars of the Catholic Church. Having gone to a Jesuit university, we had a gay and lesbian support group led by a Jesuit priest in the campus ministry office who openly identified as a gay man. He said, I'm celibate, but I know what my sexual orientation is. So I know what it's like to grow up as a gay kid. I mean, he was a priest. He didn't, but yeah, they were totally, they're super liberal. They don't give a shit what the Pope says half the time. They're like, well, I don't agree with that, so we're going to do it this way. They are responsible really for me being a Catholic long after I would have probably left the church in a big huff because they're so fucking cool. And they also really value education. Like, to be a Jesuit priest, you have to have like 2 advanced degrees.
Yeah.
Before they'll even put the collar on you. I mean, they're the educating order. I mean, that's why they run all the schools. So they're really, really, really smart people.
Oh, wow.
So every time I meet a Jesuit, even though I kind of have feelings about Catholicism in general, Jesuits are pretty awesome.
Cool.
So he didn't care. Is my short answer.
Short answer. Didn't care. He got to be in a movie.
Exactly.
And a great movie.
Yes, and not a bad movie. And I hope he got some residuals. If they probably all went to the Gonzaga prep basketball team, but still, would have been nice. So let's talk a little bit about horror movies and just kind of as a genre. And let's start with do you like scary movies? Like, are they fun for you, or are they just because people are hot and cold when it comes to this stuff. I mean, there are people who will not watch them.
I'll watch them. I'll watch them if they are popular. Like, I want to be like I have fear of missing out, but I don't search out for them. Like, I grew up watching like the Ring movies. And I like slasher movies. I like those a lot better than more ghost, ghouls, demons, that kind of thing. Demon stuff just puts me kind of like in a bad place. I just don't like it, but I do like the Scream movies. I've never watched a Freddy Krueger movie. It's just that it's too scary for me. Like, even at this point, but I'll watch a Jason movie, any Jason movie. So I'm kind of weird. I also just like to laugh. So if there's a horror comedy, like there's one recently, it was so good.
Was it The Blackening?
With I didn't see that, but I heard it was very funny.
Yeah, I heard it was very funny.
It was the one, it's with Justin Long and one of the Skarsgårds. Barbarian. That's the movie I was talking about. Malignant was also a good one I really liked. And I think the pandemic, when HBO Max put them all like just on like same day, that's I kind of started watching them that way, because I was like, oh, I get a movie theater quality movie, but in my home, so let me watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll add that to the list. I like, actually, I should say, I like watching horror movies with other people. I do not like watch them by myself, and I tend to like. I used to be scared crapless of supernatural horror films. Like, when I watched Nightmare on Elm Street from underneath a chair, like when I was a kid, like we rented it and my parents and like my family was watching it, and I was underneath the big cushy chair in the living room. I couldn't, and it kept me awake for days.
How old were you?
I would have been maybe like 10.
Oh my God, that's child abuse. Like, you can't make your kids watch Nightmare on Elm Street. One of them's hiding under a chair. That's awful.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I could have left the room. I wasn't forced to watch it, but it was like, I wanted to watch it, but I was too scared to really just like,
still.
Like, I will to this day, like, put a pillow, like, and like hug a pillow while I'm watching a horror film.
Sure.
I like a good ghost story too. I hate torture porn.
Like the Saw movies,
like the Saw movies, yeah.
Saw movies, and the one that's even worse than that is the one where they're always like traveling, and then they get
Hostel,
the Hostel films. Those make me want to throw up. Like, I watched the first one, and that was like, no, I will not watch any more of those.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, Matt, because it was like, I wondered like what the Venn diagram is between people who like scary movies and people who really like roller coasters. Because it is that like, willingness to make you scared and kind of give you the thrill, right? And I'm just like, I'm big on roller coasters. I like the idea of them, but anymore they just make me nauseous. Like, it's like I don't like the feeling of being sick to my stomach when I get off of them. If there's one that just goes straight up and down and doesn't do those like G-force curves, I'm good. But I'm the same way with like, Saw and Hostel. Like, if it just makes me want to barf, then I'm not into it. And I guess I'm kind of different from you, Matt B, because the slasher movies don't do much for me, but I love the creepy, tension, scary stuff. Like, Silence of the Lambs is one of my favorite movies of all time. And, a lot of people think that's a little bit, veers more into drama than horror. But I mean, there are some moments in that movie that are freaky as hell. And they're not all, in Buffalo Bill's basement with, him looking at her through the night vision goggles, although that was pretty fucking scary. Some of it is just looking at Anthony Hopkins' face while he's describing killing and eating somebody. And I'm just like, and I loved it. I loved it. But yeah, I basically just see, when I think about horror as a genre, it's there to make you feel fear in the same way that a comedy is there to make you feel, like laughing, and a love story is there to make you feel all romantic, and a tearjerker is there to make you feel sad, and it's just like, why is fear as an emotion so much less than all of these others? I mean, I think most people kind of put horror movies in the bargain bin of kind of like, when they think about quality films.
Which I don't think is fair. Especially if you look at the box office now, they're outperforming like, big blockbuster movies. Like the Conjuring movie that was just out was number one in the box office over Indiana Jones. So I think like the public is really into it and kind of like craving it. But yeah, but the critics, they get, I don't know what it was, but there is a lesser, they think it's a lesser art form, which I don't agree with at all.
Well, and I'll go with the critics a little bit. Some horror films are stupid.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, some of them are just dumb, but that's true for any genre. I think that it's a mistake, though, to say that a movie that makes you scared or kind of gives you the willies can't also be a really intelligent, well-made movie.
Definitely, of course.
I think it comes down to quantity, though. I mean, there are a lot of horror movies made throughout the year that we just never even make it to, because they're not even they're C films. And I think that's why a lot of people start to think of horror movies as lesser, because there's so many that are like B and C budget films. But there's a lot of like great movies like Barbarian that came out that was a critical hit. Like,
well, another big critical hit. Did you all see The Witch?
I did, yes.
The Vavitch?
The Vavitch, yes. The Vavitch. Which I thought was so, like, it wasn't scary to me. Like, that movie just didn't scare me. And it just was really slow. The critics loved it. And I was just, and I saw it in the theater. So I was like, this is and after it was over, I was like, that's it? And I kind of like the twist ending. So I won't spoil it here because we're not talking about the Vavitch in this particular show. So we usually don't give a shit about spoilers, but we'll spoil The Exorcist, but we're not going to spoil that one. But it has kind of a twisty ending, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But at the same time, when it ended, I was like, I was not scared or even on the edge of my seat once during that entire movie. Yeah,
I'm the same way. And like, I like M. Night Shyamalan movies too, but they're not. I don't find them as extremely scary. But I think they're fantastic. Most of them.
Yeah. But one of my favorite movies, I think about The Others, right? Which I love that movie. Again, great twist ending. But even before you got to the twist, I was like, what the hell is going on in this house? And I was a little freaked out by it. I mean, it was just, and I love that kind of, there's a mystery. It's freaky. I don't love a ton of jump scares just because, again, I think they're cheap. But that kind of that creepy feeling that you get because there's this mystery and it's bad, you just don't know what it is yet. That's the kind of horror movie that I can get into that a lot.
Right.
I'm also a sucker for a vampire or zombie film.
Well, vampires are hot. I mean, vampires are just
not all of them.
No, Nosferatu was not really much of a pinup, but but I like sexy vampires because I think vampires can very easily get sexy, and I think the kind of the mixing of the scary and that erotic kind of thing I really get into.
Yeah.
Zombies, I don't like. I would say that I don't like them, except that I like so many zombie things. Like I love The Last of Us, but to me that wasn't really about zombies.
No,
that was just more
about the
about
people living with the zombies.
Yes, it was putting two strangers in a very extreme situation that just happened to be a zombie apocalypse,
right?
And forcing them to get along to get something done. So that was interesting to me. But and you know, the first season at least of The Walking Dead was interesting, and then I think I got over it. But yeah,
read the graphic novel.
I watched every episode of that. I was like homework.
Every single one.
Every single one. It was like homework towards the end.
Okay, yeah, I gave up very soon. So yeah, some of those monster movies I can get it, and you know, Frankenstein as a story. Now that I appreciate the story. And that you're supposed to actually kind of empathize with the monster, and that's the point, you know, and just the dangers of, because Frankenstein, boy, at least the book really makes you think about, you know, what are the limits of science? Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, it's Oppenheimer in a way, just in a very fictional kind of sense. And so there's a lot to think about after watching something, you know, like that. So let's talk about this movie again. Did The Exorcist work for you as a horror film? A, was it a good movie? B, was it a good scary movie?
I thought it was a really good movie. I was kind of surprised because I did watch it for the first time in college, and I just remember laughing a lot through it.
The special effects, some of the special effects, especially when her head whirls around and she's got that frozen smile, and it's clearly a machine with a Linda Blair mask on. Yeah. That did not age very well. I mean, I'm sure that freaked people out in 1973 because no one had seen anything like it. But now it's like, oh, come on. But you know what? When she was floating above the bed and the nightgowns flowing behind it, that was really – I didn't see a single wire. I mean, they didn't have CGI. They had to figure out how to do that shit. And it was really good.
I think the build-up in the actual story was really good. I really appreciated that we didn't just get in and all of a sudden have a ton of jump scares and lots of ghosts and ghouls flying around and stuff. This was really you building up to the exorcism at the end of the film. You know, the tension with like, there's something up in the attic. I was scared crapless when she went up into the attic by herself and they were doing that whole scene. And she's like, and who brings a freaking candle up into the attic? Do we not have flashlights? You're going to set your house ablaze. Just going to say, the safety first.
So you're scared about the safety. Okay.
I was literally scared about the safety. But she was like, you know, you keep hearing sounds and stuff. And that's that point in your house. Like, I wouldn't go up in my own attic at, like, after a certain hour, you know, just who knows what's up there. So I was starting to get scared at that point, and I was really happy that we didn't get a ghost or a ghoul. We got the caretaker coming up.
We got the creepy butler who we never quite knew. Like, he was the one that the film director was accusing of being a Nazi. I mean, I think he was basically just a red herring, but the whole time I was like, what is up with the creepy butler? He was a little creepy.
Yeah.
He was a little creepy. But overall, yeah, I thought it was a great movie. So, and certifiably scary in parts.
I have to say, I can appreciate it that it was a good, well-made movie. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it, to be honest with you. Like I said, I saw it in college for the first time, and I slept for most of it. And then I also felt like the movie was, I must have ADHD or something, because I just can't take long movies or anything over 2 hours. And I thought the stuff, but with Regan not in it, was slow and kind of like plotting. And the stuff with Regan I thought was at least entertaining, but I felt gross watching it. I can't really explain it. Like, I had this really weird guttural feeling in my stomach watching it. And like I said, the special effects I wasn't scared one bit. But I can appreciate it. Like, I called my mom after, who saw this in the theaters when it first came out. And I asked her experience with it. And she said she didn't get sick or anyone got sick, but she couldn't sleep for a week because she was that scared.
Oh, wow.
So I can appreciate the time of year. I've seen so much weirder things in like the 2020s even. But I like I said, I can appreciate it that it's a good movie. It's a well-made movie. I understand I agree with the Oscar nomination. For me personally, I was just not a fan of it. Huh. I will never watch it again.
I I have to say, I was really surprised by how much I liked it. I was like, this is a much better movie than I thought it was going to be. Because to me, it's always been this joke. It's always been, your mother sucks cocks in hell, vomiting pea soup, and the scary makeup and just, the awful things that this little girl says. And my friend who was talking about the phone ringing and how it, made everyone jump, was also saying that when it came out to the big screen again, he went to go see it, and it was a bunch of people from, a much younger generation. I think at that point, the kids were probably millennials, and they were laughing through the whole thing. And I said, well, was that a defense mechanism because they don't want to, the laughter kind of relieves some of the terror? And he's like, I don't know. I think he said, whatever it was, it ruined the experience for me, because when he saw it the first time, people were screaming in the movie. It was just this relentless horror movie. And, something that we don't talk about a lot on this show, but we should probably talk about more, is just if I were in a theater watching this and I couldn't look at my phone, right, and the lights were low and everyone's around and the movie is as big as life, I'm sure I would be much less distractible than watching it at home by myself with my phone nearby. And every time I get a text message, it's kind of like, oh, who's messaging me? When it is kind of that slower. But I think if you went to go see this in the theater and you knew it was about demonic possession and shit was going to go down eventually, all the plotting stuff would just be actually adding some tension. We live in an era where if something's boring, you can just fast forward through it. And, it's just a completely different experience. But yeah, not everyone likes everything. But I was surprised at how good I thought it was just as a movie. And was it scary to me? I tell you what, this would have been a lot scarier if I were still a Catholic.
Okay.
Because when I was a kid, The Omen freaked me the fuck out. Because I thought the son of Satan could come down at any point, and this is a movie about it, and holy shit, it's all for you, Damien. Oh, I mean, I was laid out. I was so scared, but Amityville Horror freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah.
I will say, I think it probably the movie and that reshow, they weren't as scared today because stakes have changed. You know what I mean? They're desensitized to a lot of the stuff that goes on here. Like, it takes a lot more to gross somebody else out or scare them now. I mean, movies have just gotten, every year you find something that finds another way or just raises those stakes on you.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen all the Hostel movies, this movie looks like Mary fucking Poppins. I
mean, yeah,
it's true. But it's interesting. It depends on how old you are or when you see it, because so I saw the Poltergeist when I was a kid, and that movie, if I watch it today, I'll still be scared from it, even though it probably still has the same special effects that The Exorcist has. But I think but I showed it to my niece, who is only 16 years old, and they were like, "This is nothing. This is nothing at all."
I thought for a second you were going to say who's only 6 years old.
No, I'm not your parents. Who?
Yeah, exactly. Mr. and Mrs. Graff, I have some issues with the way that you raised your child.
It was more Mrs. Graff than Mr. Graff.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about this prologue, because a lot of people wanted it to be cut. William Peter Blatty didn't even put it in his original screenplay. It's in the book. And that's why Friedkin wanted it in, because that's how the book opens. He's like, let's get rid of it. The first composer they went to, Bernard Herrmann, who wrote a score that William Friedkin didn't like, so sorry, Bernard, wanted it cut. The studio thought we should cut it. I mean, I will admit, I opened up this movie and we're in northern Iraq and we're in an archaeological dig and there's this old man and I'm like, is this Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? Like, am I watching the right movie? It was not what I expected, because everything I remembered from The Exorcist was all about, Georgetown, Washington, D.C. But William Friedkin thought that it was really, really essential that we open there, for reasons, which I'll get into. But first, I want to hear your reaction to that whole, because it was long.
Yeah, it was also very long. Like I'm with the studio. I said cut it. I think that could have shaved off some time. But when you explained it earlier in this recording, I kind of understand why it was there. But at the time when I watched it yesterday, I had no clue. I was like, this makes no sense. I remember there was like when Father Merrin was dying, there was the shade of the Zuzu statue. So there was some connection to it. But at the time I was just like, but if they could even cut it down to even 5 minutes long, but it was a big, long portion. that I just felt like, and I was like, I didn't understand what was going on. It was, but yeah, I'm with the studios. Cut it.
I like it. I kind of feel like it was too long, but I like it because it sets up the biblical roots for the movie, because that's where, everything started with the Bible, is in this area of the world. It also kind of sets up this discussion between old world and modern world, or the Western world is kind of where science is kind of happening more now. You know what I mean? Even though we start of, mathematics and everything happened in this other region of the world. But when you think about Western culture as opposed to, Eastern culture in that sense, I think this actually sets up that idea where she's looking for a non-religious solution, a scientific solution to her problem, and then it kind of has to go full circle and go and pull back to the origins of man, essentially, or mankind.
I will say, I agree with everything you just said, Matt. The other thing that my favorite moment from the whole prologue is when he's sitting there in that other guy's office and the clock just suddenly stops. Mm-hmm. And there's that moment of silence when the ticking clock all of a sudden, and you see it in the background and it just stops right in the middle. And that is your first kind of, whew, I got a little bit of a shiver. I was not expecting it. And it was just like, ooh, something's off, something's weird. And I think it allowed the rest of the movie to kind of be a little bit of a slow plod, because it did let you know, there's some weird shit coming. It lets you know right away what was going on. And I didn't really, put it together until after the whole thing was over. It's like, why in 1973 did this demon get, and it probably had something to do with the fact that, they uncovered his amulet or whatever that, that totem was, and the kind of his soul was suddenly released. And the whole thing where he's, running through town and almost getting killed around every corner, again, seemed a little Indiana Jonesy to me. But that was also, if you look at it, it's like this demon has just kind of gotten out, and maybe he's just poking things. But I think what this demon has decided is that I actually need to possess somebody completely so that I can go after him, with my, with hands, and put him around his neck, because, just being an old lady in a carriage that almost, runs him over. But again, did that chase need to be as long as it was? Probably not. But the clock I loved, and that final image where he's standing looking at the statue from across the way, and the dogs are fighting to the death in the background, and the sun is setting. That whole thing was that. It felt pretty epic. I thought that was pretty cool, and it did kind of set the whole thing in motion. But yeah, it was long, and a whole lot of people hated it, but Friedkin would not let it go. He was like, no, this is staying. This is staying. Okay, you ready for some fun facts?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, shit ton of fun facts for this movie, because any horror movie that gets to be, get some kind of iconic status, that's going to happen. So here's the first one. Ellen Burstyn was on location filming Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which we've already talked about, when The Exorcist premiered. So she was in the middle of Nowheresville, Middle America, making this movie about a small town waitress. But she decided to just go to a local theater one night and see it, just to, be in the crowd and see how folks liked it. A woman did faint in the middle of the movie, and she said, I know what happened, so let me help this woman. And she got her out to the hallway, and she was completely passed out. And as the woman was gaining consciousness, she said, all of a sudden I just had this notion she's going to open her eyes and see the lead actress of the movie staring down at her. And she's like, I'm going to send her into hysterics. So she immediately had to find an usher and say, get over here. That woman needs help, and she ran away because she was afraid the woman would have, probably have nightmares for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Because the movie was so supernatural and freaky that the actress came to life in the theater and was hovering over my head. Anyway, I thought that was funny. Another fun fact, William Peter Blatty knew Shirley MacLaine. And when he decided that the woman at the center of his novel was to be an actress, he basically based the whole character after her.
Oh, I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what we learned today is that Shirley MacLaine was a pain in the ass because she yells at everybody. The role was originally offered to Audrey Hepburn.
Okay.
And Shirley MacLaine. Both of them passed because I think they wanted My one thing about Ellen Burstyn is that she kind of, when she plays, and I had the same reaction in Notting Hill when Julia Roberts was cast as the world's most famous actress, which is weird because Julia Roberts is the world's most famous actress. So you'd think that would be a really good casting. But one of the reasons why Julia Roberts is so good is that she just seems so relatable. She doesn't seem like a supermodel.
Yeah.
And Ellen Burstyn really seemed like kind of a real person. Now, it helped that this movie that they were making, she was kind of a political it looked like a Norma Ray kind of movie. And I'm like, I can totally see Ellen Burstyn playing that kind of role.
Yeah.
So I was into it. But I think they wanted the world to know when this movie opens, this woman is a famous actress. So how better to do that than the movie opens with Audrey Hepburn?
Yeah. That'd be interesting to see her in that. I mean, I could totally see Shirley MacLaine in it. But Audrey Hepburn, that'd be interesting to see her. But wasn't she quite a bit older than Ellen Burstyn at that time?
I think so. But, but I think still able to have a 12-year-old child, and I think that would not so old. I mean, I think she probably had a decade on Ellen Burstyn, but but I don't think it was 50 years ago.
I think that would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing with that is I would kind of expect her to lead the exorcism herself. I mean, Audrey Hepburn is such a powerful person. So.
That's true. Yes. Ellen Burstyn does kind of have this helplessness to her a little bit when she's going through all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Audrey Hepburn would have that.
Yeah.
So Linda Blair got this job after an interview with Friedkin. She didn't even audition. She just sat down and talked to him. But to your point earlier, Matt, she showed a real understanding of the film's subject matter and a real nonchalance towards a lot of the more adult and shocking moments. And I think his thought was, this girl can handle being in this movie. She's not going to be that freaked out by it. And, you never know. I mean, movies are so... It's interesting. When you peel back and you actually see sometimes the making of some of these famous movie scenes and you realize just how many crew members are standing around. They actually did film this in a house in Georgetown. So, I mean, they had to get all that equipment into a bedroom in D.C., which if you know anything about bedrooms in D.C. that were built before the 40s, they're fucking small.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these are tiny little rooms. So there probably wasn't a huge amount of crew in those places. But anyway, that's why, he said, let's bring this girl on because we're not going to give her nightmares for the rest of her life and she's not going to end up. And to all, what we can tell, I've never heard of Linda Blair going to Studio 54, with Lil Drew Barrymore and snorting coke in the ladies' room. I mean, that's just that she didn't seem to have that kind of trajectory. So she seemed to have a pretty good head on her shoulders. Probably because she didn't have much of a career after this movie. But, that being said, both Linda Blair and Ellen Burstyn suffered spinal injuries that plagued them for years because of this movie. With Linda Blair, it was when the bed was shaking so hard that she was, not when she was flopping back and forth, because I actually think that was a puppet, but when she was on the bed trying to hold on, it was shaking so hard that it misaligned her back. And Ellen Burstyn, when Regan slapped her across the face and sent her sailing across the room, they yanked a harness. And this is another thing. Friedkin was kind of an asshole. They practiced that, but when they actually did it for real, they said, yank it a lot harder than you usually do because I really want the reaction. Well, he fucked up her back for like the rest of her life because that harness sent her back. She was in a brace for a lot of the making of this movie because, she had to go to the hospital after that scene.
Wow.
So, I the more I read about William Friedkin, I'm like, he makes some good movies, but boy, he's an asshole. I don't like that shit at all. He did do a lot of creative sound mixing on this movie. He added ambient pig squeals to the demon's voice. So whenever the demon's talking, if you know that it's happening, I went back when I was watching the making of documentary, they played a little bit of the demon's voice and I could hear pigs squealing but that kind of, creepy noise that just irritates you was always part of the demon's voice. It's part of what kind of sets you on edge. And then there's some tense moments. They didn't have a score, but he would have filmed a fly or a bee buzzing around in a jar really excitedly, like trying to get out just to kind of build that sense of tension. He used a lot of sound effects as opposed to music to make some of that stuff happen, which is pretty innovative, especially at the time.
I would never even thought to do that kind of stuff. Wow, that's wow.
And maybe one of the reasons why this one picked up Best Sound. I mean, the sound folks might have said, pig squeals. Good on you, Friedkin. Here's an Oscar. So the voice of the demon, as we've discussed, is played by somebody else who originally did not want stage credit for the work until it became a huge monster hit. And she's like, yeah, I want to get on the credits. So the very last name in the credits is Mercedes McCambridge, who's an Oscar winner herself, big actress from the 40s and 50s, who he called because she always had this kind of gravelly voice. And he wanted a voice that was kind of, he said, androgynous, kind of between male and female. He didn't want some big basso profundo voice coming out of this little girl because it would just seem silly. So we wanted to get a woman, but she played the voice of the demon. She was an alcoholic in recovery, but in order to do what she needed to do for this, to do this voice, she started chain smoking.
Oh my gosh.
She swallowed a bunch of raw eggs before every take, and she started binge drinking with shots of whiskey with the idea that she'd go right into recovery as soon as this whole thing was over.
That's a dedication to your craft.
I was going to say, whoa. That's
all for this movie. I'm like, you know what?
And she didn't want credit for it?
And originally she said, I don't want, because I don't know. But she was like, she was that dedicated to it. And when she was when she was doing the voice, she said, I want to be pinned to a chair so that I'm uncomfortable, so that some of that discomfort comes through because Regan was most of the time tied to the bed and not able to do all the things she wanted to do. So she's like real into this whole method shit.
That's voice actors, yeah.
Just to do the voice. And then I guess after all that work and when it was becoming a huge monster hit, she was like, yeah, put me in the credits. I want to get some credit with this. By the way, when it came out that was another person's voice, which, hello, did you think that was Linda Blair's voice? Is my question. No. But that came out like right in the middle of Oscar season, and it was a mini scandal and pretty much shut down any chance Linda Blair had of winning, because they were like, well, she didn't do all of her own voice work. Clearly, well, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But she still stood up in a bed and said, your mother sucks cocks in hell. So I was like, that's a lot for a little girl. I would have, I don't know who won, but I justice for Linda Blair is all I'm saying. William Friedkin, asshole again, shot pistols during scenes. Like, so instead of the phone ringing, he actually shot a gun to get Jason Miller to jump at the sound of the phone and then put the phone back in the thing. The pea soup was supposed to hit him in the chest, but he secretly aimed it right for his face to get a more scared reaction. And Jason Miller was like, he was pissed. He was like, look, I'm an actor. You want me to look scared? I'll look scared.
Right.
You don't have to do this shit to actually scare me like that. I hate that kind of bullshit.
Me too.
It just makes me so upset. And at the very end, Father O'Malley, again, not a professional actor, but maybe, hire a professional actor if you want real tears, actually slapped the guy across the face right before he called action so that he would be crying when he gave Father Karras his last rites at the bottom of the stairs.
I mean, you have to slap somebody really hard to make them cry.
Yeah.
So this man's an asshole.
Yeah, no, yes, you do have to slap the shit out of somebody, and I think it was the slap, but also kind of the shock. I've just been slapped across the face in front of a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Now do the scene. I mean, listen, he did a really good job, but come on. A lot of fun facts in this movie, but again, there's so many that I just couldn't say no to. There's a guy named Paul Bateson who has a bit role in this movie. He's a medical technician when she's getting all of her x-rays in the hospital. Years later, he would be convicted of murder and is now an alleged serial killer. He killed a bunch of gay men in New York City. And Friedkin later made a movie inspired by Paul Bateson called Cruising, starring Al Pacino, which is widely considered to be one of the most homophobic movies ever made, which is kind of ironic considering he got his start doing The Boys in the Band.
Wow. Do you remember what scene this technician was in?
Yes, and if you watch the making of documentary, he doesn't have any lines, but as she is going into the big X-ray machine to look at her brain, he's the one who's just kind of, there to kind of make sure everything's working, and I think he pushes the button. He didn't have any lines, but he was this extra who was in this movie as a medical technician who years later started killing a bunch of gay men in New York City and went to jail, and Friedkin made another movie all about him.
Wow. I'm going to have to go back and look at that scene again. That's
right?
So crazy.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then the last thing is a bit of news. There is a brand new sequel coming out in the year 2023. And it's by the same guy who brought back, and I should have written his name down, the same guy who brought back the Halloween movies, starring when he brought Jamie Lee Curtis back to the series. And they basically said, ignore all the other sequels. This is the only sequel now. So even though there are 2 sequels to The Exorcist, they're basically saying, ignore those. Those are no longer canon. This is the only sequel to The Exorcist. So it's going to pick up as though those 2 movies never happened. And it's going to be called The Exorcist: Believer. It's coming out this October. Leslie Odom Jr., famous for Hamilton, plays the father of a possessed girl who seeks out Chris McNeil. Ellen Burstyn is coming back to play Chris McNeil for support. A nurse who is attending to this girl is played by Ann Dowd from The Handmaid's Tale, and there are unsubstantiated rumors that Linda Blair will also make a cameo in this movie.
I mean, she's got to.
So,
I mean, I'm going to see it. Even though I didn't like this movie, I'm still going to see it.
I'm totally going to see it. I'm going to see this one in the theater. I am so there.
Yeah.
All right, folks. It is game time. Who's up for it?
Always.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So this, we're returning to one of our classic games. This game is called Pazuzu the Musical. Apparently, we didn't learn our lesson from Carrie the Musical, and someone has decided to put The Exorcist on the Broadway stage with a bunch of music and lyrics. So my question for you, who is, you've signed on to produce this movie, because you're not very smart. And my question for you is, who do you want to approach and who do you want to hire to write the music and lyrics for The Exorcist the Musical? And what is one pivotal moment from this movie that you feel just begs to be turned into a musical number? Matt, we are going to start with you.
Okay, so I am going to use one of my favorite composers. I'm going to say Danny Elfman is going to do the music and lyrics for this because he's responsible for the lyrics of one of my top 10 films of all time, Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay.
Great musical. I absolutely love the music associated with the film. Properly scary. It can be playful if you need to, but he's really good with that eerie sound. I think the moment that I think needs to be on the stage is the moment where Chris is meeting with all the doctors in that large room, and they're finally telling her there's just nothing we can do. And they tell her, maybe look somewhere else for a different solution, even if it is something that might be psychosomatic. And so the whole witch doctor is basically going to be our musical number that she's got to talk about.
Awesome.
So I just came back from New York seeing Back to the Future, the musical.
Ooh, how was it?
I loved it. I loved it. I got emotional because Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time. And I went opening weekend of the previews, but it taught me that anything can be turned into a musical. It was good. It was just, and Broadway can do anything technical wise. So I think you go one or two ways with this. You can either go serious or make it really campy. So if we're going to go the serious route, I mean, I know this is kind of like a hacky person to say because everyone will say him, is Andrew Lloyd Webber, because I think you need someone with that gravitas for people to take this seriously, because you need, and he has experience making movies, making musicals out of movies with, he did it with School of Rock recently, which was actually a really good musical. You need someone to actually take him seriously. And and I think he's the only one who can do it. Kind of make a Phantom kind of spin on it. And the musical number, I think, would be, there's got to be some kind of like beat, like it's the Power of the Christ compels you. And I can just see that going, the power of the Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. It has that like, and then this gets a little bit campy, but this makes it into a big dance number. And then Reagan's flying up above on the bed and everything. I think that would be a good 11 o'clock number.
Does everyone in the front three rows get like saran wrap so when the pea soup starts flying, they can kind of
Evil Dead the musical,
can cover? Yeah.
Splatter zone, pea soup zone.
Awesome. Yeah, I kind of went serious but a little avant-garde. The composer that I'm going to tap to write the music and lyrics for my version of The Exorcist is Trent Reznor.
Oh,
who has done some film scoring, but, and I did not know this until I did a little research on him. 9 Inch Nails was not really a band. I didn't know that. It was him. He played almost all the instruments. He did all the, I mean, occasionally he would bring in another musician to fill in something if he didn't feel like he could do it well. But basically it was a one-man show. So if he wanted to say music and lyrics by Nine Inch Nails, that would be cool too, because I wanted to have that kind of feeling to it. And I had a couple of things that I'd written down for, ideas for musical numbers, more things that I think just could have been expounded upon, in the movie to make things maybe a little bit more clear. So I'll mention two of them. One, I just thought Regan needed a song about really missing her dad, because that, would give, you got that one thing where she didn't even have any lines. She just heard her mom yelling at the operator in Italy to get the dad on the phone, and she just looked kind of sad. But I think that a song by herself that starts off, "Why doesn't he love me?" and ends up, "That fucking asshole," what a jerk he is, to kind of get a little bit of that sadness / anger at the whole situation. And I think Trent Reznor, if you got an actress with a voice who could, do it justice, I think that could be really powerful. But then the other thing I thought is really great to have a song at the beginning all about Captain Howdy. Right. And she could be talking to him in the basement. Like, we don't see any of that. And maybe not even bring any actor on to play Captain Howdy. Just let like an electric guitar be him, but like you can hear her talking back to him. So you just kind of get that, I appreciate that the film didn't want to like go there immediately because it wanted to have this more kind of slow build. But when you actually look at the story and everything that happened, she was having whole conversations with this spirit in the basement, with the Ouija board, long before any of the other events in this thing ever took place. And I thought, maybe it would be worth it to see a little bit of Regan communing with Captain Howdy down in the basement while her mom's off making a movie and her dad's in Italy, doing God knows what. So anyway, The Exorcist, the musical, not coming to Broadway anytime soon. But, listen, I've not seen Carrie the musical. It has some fans.
Yeah, people like it.
It's the most notorious flop ever to make, to hit Broadway. I think people thought it was kind of ridiculous. So there you are. All right, we are going to end this episode the same way we do all of them, with our little game of skip, rent, or buy. Skip means I did not need to see this movie. Eric, why did you make me watch it? Rent means, yeah, I saw it. I'm glad I saw it. It was okay. It was not a terrible experience, but I do not need to see it again. Back to the rental bin you go. Buy means this movie is brilliant. It's a work of genius. It doesn't mean you're going to shell out the money to buy it, but it does mean I could absolutely watch this movie again. If anyone's never seen it, sit down with me. I will watch this one more time. So we're going to go in reverse order. Matt Baughman, we're going to start with you.
I'm going to say skip it. Normally, I would say for a movie that's like in the AFI, I would say rent it just to have that experience. But I don't think you have to put yourself through it. If you don't like horror movies and you don't like this kind of stuff, there's no reason for you to watch this movie, like historically. So I'm actually going to skip it.
Okay. Matthew Graff.
I am a rent with a buy rising. I actually think the story was good. I think it was well done. Is it a horror film by today's standards? It might not actually be a horror film by today's standards, but I think overall it's actually a pretty good movie. And it's kind of, I like seeing this as the basis that we build a lot of stuff. It's kind of like watching Alien. I mean, Alien, that's a movie that people build a lot of their films on. I think it's one that inspires. I kind of feel like The Exorcist is another one of those films. So I definitely think people should watch it. Am I going to add it to my library? Probably not. No. But what you said, I would sit down and watch it again if somebody wanted to watch it. I wouldn't have objections to it. So I'm definitely a strong rent.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you, Matt. If rent with a buy rising is a thing that we're doing, sorry, Kristen, but we're doing it. I would give it the same kind of score. I'm not eager to watch. Like, I'm not going to watch it again tomorrow. I'm probably not going to watch it again without some kind of somebody spurring me on. But if someone said, I've never seen that movie, I would say to them, it's actually a really good movie. Like, I would watch it with you, and just sit down and watch it again. And probably, a lot of times things bear repeating because you'll notice things the second time that you wouldn't notice the first time. And so I would watch the prologue again and be like, okay, if the demon is out now, then what's going on? And I would look for those little subtle clues, because I think there was a lot of, surprisingly, for a movie that's known mostly for a girl whose head turns around her shoulders 360 degrees while she's vomiting pea soup, this was a pretty subtle movie in a lot of ways before it kind of went off the rails and kind of went there. So all those little clues and things, I would love to kind of watch and see, what happens again. So yeah, probably not going to buy this one, but could totally watch it again. And again, I think I'm reacting more to my expectations than anything else. I came into this with very low expectations. Like I thought this is going to be ridiculous. It's not going to age well. The special effects are going to be stupid. I'm going to laugh at it the whole time. And I didn't. I was into it for most of it. And it didn't try to do like little flourishes of comedy to relieve the tension the way that a lot of horror movies do. It just went there, even in the places where, and again, I've said this line 4 times now. I'm going to say it again because Your Mother Sucks Cocks in Hell is just a funny thing. That wasn't even funny in the movie. I was like expecting that would be something I would just howl at. But actually in the moment, it was like, holy shit, because there was a whole lot of background about how this man actually felt about his mother. And it wasn't just a yo mama joke. It was, really pointed towards some things he was dealing with. Anyway, there we are. I love a little bit of diversity. Not every movie is for everybody, so it's all cool. But yeah, The Exorcist. Who knew? Join us next week. First of all, thank you, Matt Baughman, for joining us this time.
Thank you.
So much fun.
Great.
Even though I didn't enjoy the movie, I enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, even movie hype. So sometimes it's worth it if you have to sit through a stinker that you really don't enjoy, just to have a fun conversation with a couple. Yes, I really enjoyed it. Does make it worth it. Movies are meant to be communal. They are not, I watch a lot of movies by myself in my living room, but that's really not the way movies are meant to be. So
agreed. So I'm going to go see I'm about to go see Barbie to get a palate cleanser.
Okay, very good, very good. Let us know what you think about Barbie. Yeah, I want the Barbenheimer double feature myself. I think I might see one right after the other. Next week, we are going to talk about Paul Newman and Robert Redford in their clingy white tank tops in The Sting, film about the 1930s, and they play a couple of gamblers. And other than the fact that it won Best Picture, I don't know a thing about it. But I'm really looking forward to it. Allie will be back with us next week. So while we're sad to see Matt go, we will look forward to seeing Allie again. And we will see you then. I'm Eric.
I'm Matt.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.